Hello and welcome. I'm Jenny Florence from the A to Z of Emotional Health online library, and this video is part of the series to help with bereavement and the process of grieving. In the last video I spoke about the way that something can suddenly come along and with it comes a sort of a huge wave of emotion, and these things can sometimes take us by surprise. Part of what can happen when that happens to us is that as we try to find our feet, as we try to sort of regain some sense of stability and move forwards, we often experience, I think, extreme exhaustion. And I've met quite a lot of people that feel as though they're failing if they start to feel shattered and exhausted. They feel they've taken enough time out, they ought to be getting back on track again. It's extraordinary actually how critical we often are of ourselves in these circumstances. Going back to one of the first videos in this series, when I spoke about the process of grieving as a massive computer download, where everything else slows down and some of the functionality ceases altogether. Even when we'll use the same analogy, even when we have downloaded a huge program, even when we think the download is complete, it still takes a long while. It can still be trundling away in the background, unbeknown to us. So even when we begin to think that we're getting back on track, it's really, really common to sort of sometimes feel like we're taking sort of, 3 steps forwards and 2 steps back. And particularly in terms of our energy levels. I actually think it takes a huge amount of energy to push ourselves back into the world. It's really, really hard. It's emotionally challenging. It's emotionally draining. And so sometimes even if we're starting to feel as though we can take those steps, we do so and then, afterwards we kind of keel over. This is not a failure. This doesn't mean you're not getting something right or something, is going horribly wrong. This is really, really normal stuff in this process. We can't just find our feet and regain all our energy again. It doesn't work like that. And highly charged emotions are physically draining. It's how it is. When we lose someone, it's actually quite a physical experience. Grieving is not an intellectual process, although it affects our state of mind. It's an emotional process, and our emotions have a huge impact on the way that we feel physically. If we're stressed, we get very tired. We're tense, we're wound up, we feel it in the body. And this is a big emotional process, and so we do feel it very physically. So it's very important, if we have a day where we have thought that we were moving forwards and then suddenly we find ourselves feeling utterly shattered, it's not a setback. It simply means that you've expended a lot of energy and you are now needing to recoup a little bit before you take the next step forwards. The way that we interpret these kinds of experiences are very important, because if we interpret them from a negative perspective, that will actually generate negative emotions, which will actually slow us down even more and make us feel even worse. So when we understand that this is a very normal response, we're not going backwards, it's just very normal, we can listen to that and recognise that if we've taken a few steps forwards and then we're shattered, listening to ourselves and being very big on self-care, we're prioritising our self-care during this process. It's very important that we do that. It means that we are going to need to take a bit of time out. We may need to rest a while. We may need to, really, really just, like I said, maybe retreat a little bit. It's not a setback. It doesn't mean we're going backwards. It just means we're needing to recoup and regain a little bit more energy before we move forwards. I hope that this is helpful in understanding the kinds of things that you may be feeling. If you have actually lost someone that you love and you're tangled up, because that's what it can really feel like, tangled up in this really complex and, emotional process of grieving. Take care.